Let's start discussing how to know what your boundaries are and how to set them and keep them with your kids. So first, we encourage parents to look for what are the limits for safety. If you think about skiing, so I live in an area where we've got good snow skiing. And what will happen every morning is that a ski patrol will go through the mountains and see where there might be some avalanche dangers. And they'll create a boundary stating where you can and can't ski. So they've looked over what is going to be a potential danger for those on the mountain and created a boundary for that. So as parents, we encourage you to look at what limits for safety do you need for your home. And those are things like emotional safety and mental safety and physical safety. So some examples of that are that we have some boundaries around how people will be treated. That if we aren't interacting really respectfully with each other, then whoever's not being respectful needs to go to a different space. We also have limits around physical safety, so hitting's not okay. We have limits around mental safety. So this is in pertaining to screens. We have a limit on how much screen time is available for them. We have boundaries around them needing to communicate with us where they're going to be and who they're going to be with and what time they're going to be back. And that they've got to let us know when they're leaving and not just run off. And so just looking for your home, what do you need for people to be able to feel safe? Now, you may notice that you need to set some boundaries for yourself too. I have a little bit of a hot temper, especially with my tougher child. And so I've had to set some limits for safety with other people from me so that when I know that I'm getting hot tempered, that my boundary is that I'm not going to yell or scream at anybody, that I am going to remove myself and take some time to emotionally regulate before interacting with others again. So just think about yourself and your kids and your home. What limits for safety do there need to be? Next, this is a new concept that we really want you guys to understand. And so we want to use another analogy for this. If you were to break into a home or a business that had an alarm system, as soon as you broke in, the alarm would go off. And that alarm is indicating that you have crossed into a boundary and that you haven't honored a boundary. Because you can go into a store, for example, during a day when the alarm is off and it's in its office hours or whatever, and no alarm would go off. But it's really that this individual or business has set an alarm of what the boundaries are and when it's okay to cross it and when it's okay to come into the space and when it's not. And that when it's not honored, the boundary that's set up, an alarm goes off. Now, what's interesting to know, and what a lot of us don't know, is that our bodies are wired with an internal alarm system as well. That we start to feel something when we do not feel honored or respected, or like our boundaries are being honored by other people. And the feelings that we start to notice are resentment or agitation. So if your child was really disrespectful to you, or you just cooked a really great dinner and they threw a fit about it and threw their food on the floor, you naturally would feel some sort of resentment or frustration or agitation. Now, some parents would shove this down saying, I just need to learn how to be more patient. And there are some of us that do need to be more patient. But we want you to start paying attention to those feelings, to have an awareness of what those are, so that you can start to see what boundary needs to be set here. So if you made that lovely dinner and they threw it on the floor and whined and complained and you felt bothered by it, we want you to see that as an alarm going off, that a boundary has been crossed, and that you do not feel respected as an individual, and that it's time to have some boundaries around that, such as if you do not love dinner, that is fine, and you are entitled to your opinion. That's in your boundary, and you own that. However, that needs to be communicated respectfully. Or the kitchen is closed and dinner's done and there's no other food for the rest of the night. That is an appropriate boundary to have, and it honors the child and their boundaries, and it honors you and your boundary. And you don't have to be more patient with it. Rather, that alarm is the indication that it's time to set a boundary. So throughout the next week, pay attention to when you start to feel that resentment and that agitation and see what's causing it. Most of the time when we work with parents, it's things around respect and responsibility. You can almost always count on those two things. So look at your life, examine what's going on, start to pay attention to those alarms, and know that when that alarm goes off, that's a sign that boundary work needs to be done. Next, we want to teach you the 3 C's of boundary work. So first, we need to create boundaries. And everything that we just taught you really helps you create boundaries, knowing what the limits for safety are, and then also that internal alarm system. And when you are paying attention to those things, you'll start to know what boundaries need to be created. Now, once again, we want to remind you that we are not creating all sorts of boundaries to restrict all of our kids' freedom and rob them of any control in their life. And we'll talk about that a lot in the next session. But we really want to just establish the ones that are about safety and responsibility. So you're going to create the boundaries. There are a lot of people who don't really know what their boundaries are, and so you need to get clear about these yourself. Next, you're going to communicate them clearly, and then you're going to carry them out consistently. So like I mentioned with creating, we want to help our home feel safe, peaceful, and happy. So create boundaries that do that teach your kids respect and responsibility, and that will help them become happy and healthy adults. And we really want you to be listening to that inner voice, to that inner alarm system about what the boundaries should be. Now, no matter how long I've parented, I still kind of wrestle with boundaries a little bit, trying to decide which ones I should and shouldn't set. So you're going to be in that position too, and just check in with yourself as you go. Really think about the health, happiness, and safety of your kids, but then balancing that with giving them freedom of choice and the ability to choose things for themselves and experience the outcomes of those choices, and do your best to decide. So next, we're going to communicate our boundaries clearly. We think that our kids know what to do and what not to do, but sometimes we don't realize that there may be some communication lapses, that they may not really know what your boundary is. Now, we don't think that you should have to communicate your boundary, the same boundary 100 times. We think that you should communicate a boundary one time, and then after that, any time that somebody crosses that boundary, they just receive a natural consequence for crossing that boundary. And that sequence of events, which we will talk about a lot more in the E of Wiser Parenting, will really be the best teacher, more than you communicating over and over and over again. So for example, if you're on the phone and a child comes in and wants to interrupt you a whole bunch, you can say one time, I can talk to you when I'm off the phone. And then if they come in again, you can either just ignore and walk away and lock yourself in a room, or you can turn and say, what did I say? What did I say? And just repeating that over and over again, so that you're really just communicating this once. Now, we really want to encourage you to communicate your boundaries in a way that honors you and the other person. And the way we like to describe this is it's like a lantern. So picture that you and another person have a lantern, and that you've scooted the lantern just towards you so that the light is only shining on you. That's when you're talking in a way that's attacking the other person, or being really defensive or aggressive in your conversation. But if the lantern is scooted all the way towards the other person, they're the only one illuminated by the light. And and you're not illuminated by the light. And really what we see then is that that person is kind of getting to walk all over you. And what we want to encourage you to do is to put the lantern in between the two of you, where you're both illuminated, you're both honored, and you are assertive in your communication about your boundary, but not attacking. So say that you wanted to communicate that you are happy to listen to your kids when they speak to you respectfully. You wouldn't say, "Hey, you little stinker, what's your problem? Why are you talking to me like that? Why won't you get your act together? You need to stop that or I'm going to smack you." That's really attacking, and you're the only one that's honored in that situation because you're standing up for yourself, but the other person is really belittled and attacked. The opposite, it would be where you're saying, "Oh, I really don't want you to talk to me like that," and then they're attacking you. "Well, I'll talk to you however I want to talk to you," and then you're not standing up for yourself. But really just being confident and assertive about your boundary. I am happy to listen to you when you talk to me respectfully. That is assertive but not attacking. Next, be simple in your communication. Especially the younger the kids are, we just need simplicity. We don't need to over-explain. We don't need to say all the reasons why we need someone to talk to us respectfully or all of that. Our kids start to tune us out and they lose all of it. We really just need to be simple at saying, "I am happy to listen to you when you talk kindly," or "I'm happy to listen when you use your sweet voice." Whatever you need to use to get them to understand, but keep it really simple. Now last, and this is probably the hardest of them all, and I know as a mom that gets tired or worn out or nervous to give a boundary, this is probably the hardest part, is to carry out your boundary consistently. Really, a boundary ceases to be a boundary if it's optional, if it's temporary, if it is only there from time to time. Now, I know that you're all really familiar with gambling and that it is something that can be addictive to an individual. And the reason why it is because from time to time somebody will win. And so people will go and gamble thinking somebody wins from time to time. And it could be me. This could be my lucky opportunity. And so I'm going to test this out and see if this is the time that I come out a winner. The reason gambling is so powerful is because it uses something called intermittent reinforcement. And of the different kinds of reinforcement out there, this is the most powerful. The chance that something just might happen from time to time keeps our brain wanting to just test it out to see if it'll work. So the same thing happens with boundary trespassing, that our kids will test and test and test to see if the boundary is going to be consistent. And if they can cross the boundary from time to time, that is intermittent reinforcement, just like gambling. And it tells the child's brain, "I should just keep on testing the boundary because from time to time I can actually get away with this." So we really want to help you see the importance of carrying out your boundary consistently. Knowing that you have selected just a handful of non-negotiable boundaries and not 100 boundaries that you're trying to hold. And we will teach you in our with earned consequences, how to be able to hold that boundary even if you aren't giving a consequence like right in the moment, but you're exhausted and you need to come back around to it later. So we will teach you how to do that, but just to be really, really consistent with that. Next, it's important to know that we need to hold our boundary with as little emotion as possible. So one of the things that is really rewarding for our children's brains is if we give a lot of attention and focus and emotion to something in their life. And if we're giving a lot of attention and focus and emotion to them crossing a boundary, then that's going to reinforce them crossing the boundary. Instead, we want to just back off and be as non-emotional as possible and just hold the boundary. And when they cross it, just, "Oh, bummer. cross that boundary. Oh, uh-oh, cross that boundary. Just something really simple that communicates that the boundary has been crossed, and it's like a mathematical equation. You did X and X, and now that's going to equal Y, and just keep it like that. And we're also going to hold this boundary with as few words as possible. Now, we are going to talk about all of this in great detail in the E of Wiser Parenting, so stay tuned for that. And we're going to let our actions do the teaching instead of having to do any sort of lectures or having to remind them of the boundaries over and over again. I promise you that if you make it through all of the letters with the program, you'll learn how to do this with great success.